My name's Aston. I'm the General Manager of an organisation called Glass Futures. It's a pleasure to be here today and to present. I'm going to hopefully give you a practical view on my experience. I'm an engineer by trade, we're not an investor. I'll talk a little bit about Glass Futures, but I really want to share some practical experience, talk about some of the challenges and hopefully open up some insight and arm investors better with the information they might need to make good investment decisions going forward. So Glass Futures is a research and technology organisation. We're akin to a catapult. I'm not allowed to say we're a catapult though, so don't quote me on that. What that means is we're here to really wrap around and understand what are the new technologies that are coming into industry and to help accelerate them, bring them to market faster and actually make sure they can be implemented effectively. We're essentially built by the glass industry, for the glass industry. I'll talk a bit about what that means, but one thing I'd like to state is when people think about glass, you don't always understand or think about exactly where it is in the world around us or in its actual use through society. So I always like saying that it isn't just the bottles and jars you see in a supermarket, it isn't just the glazing you see on a window. Fibre optic communications, James Webb Space Telescope, all of these things have been enabled by a material that is really at the core of civilization. It's often an enabling material that allows other things to happen and other innovations to actually propel. So to give you an idea, when you talk about the glass industry, sometimes it's easy to think about a manufacturer. What you actually have to think about is a wider supply chain of actually what serves the industry and what industries that the glass industry serves. So just to give you an idea, we're a membership organisation. People pay an annual subscription fee to participate in our research, but also to try and spot where the opportunities are. Some of those members are core manufacturers that manufacture large amounts of glass. These can be fibres for insulation. It's things like glazing, but it's also speciality glasses for people's phones. But the reality is the people that use the glass, sometimes they're people that we're much more common as brand names or major investors or major corporate organisations. So a company like RHI Magnesita produces a majority of the world's speciality bricks. They're not a very common company that people might have heard of. A company like Special Shapes Refractory Corporation, which employs 15 people out in Birmingham, Alabama, which is serving this industry, is again a really small actor in this space that requires the materials in the industry to move forward. Companies like Diageo, however, and Velux have got massive investments, massive corporate social responsibility programs. And what you're seeing in this supply chain is an industry that is struggling to innovate because it builds £150 million capital assets that it runs for 24/7 over a 20-year period that take 2 weeks to warm up and 2 weeks to turn off. The capital intensity of the glass industry cannot be underestimated. When you warm up a box of bricks to 1600 degrees Celsius, you can't do it in 10 minutes. It takes 2 weeks to do these things. So what that means is the risk aversion of the glass industry is really high from a corporate organisation approach. However, when a company like Diageo commits to a 50% absolute carbon reduction in its products by 2030, and 70% of its emissions are scope 3, and of those emissions, nearly 50% is from the glass it purchases from the glass industry, make no bones about it, that organisation needs to see the rest of its supply chain decarbonise and move forward with technology. That's essentially the foundation for Glass Futures. Our idea is to support organisations on their sustainability journey wherever they are in that supply chain. It's to demonstrate disruptive technology, to de-risk it, to prove it at scale, make sure it really works, but also to begin helping to generate new ideas, to support companies to generate better ideas as well. We're glass-centric, we're not glass-exclusive. I think that's really important to state. So we believe in a sustainable future enabled by glass, but not only made of glass. Just to give you an idea, we're part of a recent major investment that was made by Innovate UK under the Foundation Industries Sustainability Consortium. So when we think about glass and the challenges it has, it's very similar to the same challenges that the chemical industry has, that the steel industry has, that paper and ceramics have as well. So one of the things that's really important to state is that the same challenges that you see in this major well-established capital-intensive industry is exactly the same challenge everywhere else. So if you can unlock technologies that support the glass industry, you can unlock technologies that support all of these other base manufactured industries as well. So I want to take you a bit of a journey through our fuel switching. I'm an engineer. I enjoy playing with big hot boxes. I'm a professional pyromaniac. That's probably my main sort of status in life. So a few years ago, we built a combustion test research facility. This is what we call our CTB. On that facility itself, we were essentially following an industrial fuel switching grant by what was BEIS at the time, but is now DESNZ, must get up to speed with changes in government regulations. It's essentially a skid that allows us to investigate, not just using natural gas, which is the common fuel source used in industry, There is some use of electric as well. It's not a new technology. Oxy-fuel combustion is not a new technology for the glass industry. I read a while ago that oxy-fuel combustion is a form of carbon capture. Well, the glass industry's used oxy-fuel for 40 years and it's never considered it as a form of carbon capture because it still throws all the carbon up the stack. What we wanted to investigate on this facility is what do the different ratios of different fuel types actually do inside a combustion space. The main issue that the glass industry has got is that if it's built an asset for £150 million that should run for the next 15 years, it's not going to, in the first 6 months of that operation, think, hey, this is a good technology, let's try it out. Because the risk it has is if the bricks start flaking apart, or if the parts of the furnace start falling in on itself, its complete business model is wrecked. There's a stat that I always like that really helps to explain this capital intensity. The glazing industry has 3 furnaces in the UK. Pilkington's is a very common name. Saint-Gobain's a common name. There's another company called Guardian Glass. Those 3 furnaces produce pretty much the whole of the UK's glazing construction output, about 800 tonnes per day on average. So if you lose one glass furnace in the UK producing glazing, you've lost 30% of the materials that are going into the construction sector. So they cannot carry out any sort of research on their own asset. So we built something that was designed for the glass industry. We also realised that the steel industry is interested in doing things. They've got different burners, they use slightly different characteristics. So we modified this equipment to support some steel industry trials. What happens when I fire the casing of a nuclear reactor with hydrogen fuel as opposed to natural gas? Does it impact the chemical composition of that steel? Because if it does, I'm probably not going to be able to go anywhere near a port at any point in the next 100 years with this nuclear reactor. So we looked at glass, we looked at ceramics. They've got the same issue. Every ceramic manufacturer in the UK produces most of its materials from local quarries. They've all got slightly different chemical compositions. Is it okay and is it safe to continue producing these same bricks with hydrogen? And they have to test pretty much every single product they sell into the market. Otherwise, it's not going to be certified and up to the same standards for building codes, etc. So everyone's got the same issue: steel, ceramics, glass. What we've also been doing though is working with industry to try and demonstrate this stuff really at scale. So over the course of the past few years, and we have a number of industrial trials coming up this year as well, we've actually fired industrial scale furnaces on pure 100% biofuels. Often we've got companies like Diageo that are getting the output of these furnaces because they're at a real scale. In Derry Lynn in Northern Ireland, we fired a furnace for 3 weeks. Its fuel consumption is probably in the region of about 1.2 tonnes an hour of liquid fuels, and we did that on a continuous basis for 3 weeks. This stuff is expensive and it's difficult, so innovation funding has supported and helped us to actually demonstrate these things for the first time. Also did the same in Derry Lynn, the same in Pilkington's in St Helens as well, and produced sheet glass. So Glass Futures as an organisation has recently built and is in the process of commissioning a pilot line in St Helens. I'm originally a southerner, but I now live in Yorkshire and I now work in St Helens, so I've travelled all over the country. But we're building essentially 160,000 square foot facility that's actually putting in place an at-scale glass manufacturing line. We'll produce about 4 kilometres a day of rolled glass. We could produce 60,000 bottles a day. This is really about having a global playground that doesn't exist anywhere else to test at-scale industrial technologies. When you think about our organisation as an RTO and supporting third-party companies to actually develop technology, we have a new playground that exists in the world that has never existed before to actually come and do things on a proper glass manufacturing site where production doesn't matter. We can afford to lose the output. We can afford to have a brick that breaks or that falls in. We can afford to disrupt the flue gases so we can test carbon capture or waste heat recovery, or we can actually use new industrial symbiotic processes to try and create waterfall efficient processes that are looking at things like chemical manufacturing, etc. So we are glass centric, but are not glass exclusive because that's not really where the long-term innovation is going to be. Some pictures that are relatively recent from the construction itself. It's 130 metres long, it's 50 metres wide, and it's 30 metres tall because that's how big you need to have an industrial process. We really want to give the investor world and the startups world an opportunity to connect straight through to the customers, straight through to the big manufacturers, the big brands, in a place that's still a bit like an academic institution, a bit like that Fab Lab, create a venture type space where they can actually come, learn, develop, and find their end customers on day one. Our key next steps, we've got lots of hydrogen trials planned, and we've got quite a lot of participation across sort of wider UK R&D initiatives. I'll actually put my hands up within this room and say that we don't have huge investor base links at the moment. we've got the routes to the customers, and they're actually saying to us, what are these technologies you see emerging? What are they that are coming through? So I suppose the key thing that I'm recognising in sitting in this room is to say, well, actually having those links straight to investors and actually putting events on at the facility is probably something that we are not in the right position to do yet. We're in the position to do it. We haven't taken those steps, so that's probably the key question to actually say, how do we make sure that we do have investors linked in at the right time with an organisation like Glass Futures, because I see the opportunities as being very vast. With regards to particular fuel switching challenges, wherever there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. You're probably replicating a lot of what you've said before. Equipment lead times and costs are really difficult. You see people saying, I want to switch. These things are coming through. How much does it cost? Is it available? I can't believe it takes 2 years to get an electrolyser. You must be crazy. These are real challenges that when the industry approaches us to say, how can we do this? You say, look, unfortunately you have to get in line. We've got a long-term partnership with Siemens where we're looking at quite a lot of technology developments, and their main customers are Amazon Web Services. So if you want to buy a piece of equipment and Amazon Web Services want it in front of you, well, guess who Siemens are going to sell the equipment to? A big major customer that's doing things. So we do see restrictions in the market that are challenging. Access to capital and funding is definitely a challenge. We see this with our major manufacturers. At the end of the day, they're making business decisions about, what's the cost, what's the ROI, what's the fuel cost, and this is seen as a big restriction from a pricing perspective. And the business size and the risk appetite, there are still some family-run glass manufacturers. There are, major multinational conglomerates that have got to pick and choose between cost codes of where they place their investments based on what the government policy is like or who the local companies are they can work with. Socioeconomic pressure, you mentioned the Red Sea. I won't stray into politics in this room, but we see that as having major impacts on supply chains and actually people's appetite to switch over different time periods. The UK is competing against the world. There's only one UK glass company that's now owned by a UK-based company and multinationals. So at the end of the day, they're looking at the UK as an option against other options overall. So how do we make the UK the most attractive place for them to continue to place these fuel switching options and not lose it to other places in the world? So expertise, skills and personnel, I see this as one of the big challenges. We're approached very often at the moment. What are your safety procedures around hydrogen? What's the wax point to these biofuels? We've not used them before. This skills and expertise to support the industry is something we really see as lacking. So SMEs or new companies that are coming through that have got real key experts can actually bring a lot of value to these businesses that have historically just been shrinking the size of their organisations, losing expertise and skills as years have gone by. So I hope you found this interesting. I hope this has been a bit of insight, and I really want you to think about how do we make sure that the investor market is tied in with items like this. We are a new research organisation. We're not an established catapult that's been doing these things for a long period of time. So we have an opportunity to approach this market in a different way and actually set something that's aligned with the wider investor market. So thank you very much.